The cameras had barely stopped rolling when the studio lights dimmed, leaving an uneasy silence in the air. Prince Harry, usually composed even under intense media scrutiny, paced nervously behind the green room door, muttering under his breath. The exchange with Lorraine Kelly had been sharper than anyone had expected, every word dripping with tension, every gesture magnified by live television. "What did I just witness?" whispered one of the producers, clutching a clipboard like a life raft. "He's never reacted like that before. Not even at the palace." Harry ran a hand through his hair, the familiar weight of royal expectation pressing down on him. He had come to Lorraine's show to discuss his charity work, the foundation he had built to support mental health initiatives. But Lorraine, relentless in her questioning, had steered the conversation into territory he was unprepared for: family scandals, tabloid headlines, and accusations he felt bordered on character assassination. "You can't just twist words," he had exclaimed, voice rising despite himself. "I am here to talk about the work I'm doing, not the gossip you feed your audience." Lorraine, unflinching, leaned forward, her sharp eyes locked on him. "But Harry, the public needs to know the truth. You can't hide behind titles and expect everyone to believe your side of the story without question." The moment had escalated quickly, a clash of wills that neither party could or would de-escalate. The studio director, sweating behind his headset, had made the call: the broadcast had to end immediately. And just like that, Prince Harry, the royal with the reputation of grace under pressure, had been unceremoniously escorted off the set. Now, in the quiet of the green room, the reality hit him. This incident would dominate headlines for days. Social media would erupt with memes, opinions, and endless debate. But more than that, it had shaken him personally. Lorraine Kelly was known for her tenacity, but Harry had expected at least a modicum of diplomacy. Instead, he felt cornered, humiliated in front of millions of viewers. Yet even in that tension, Harry's mind began to wander. He remembered why he had come in the first place: the foundation, the children who relied on support, the families grappling with mental health crises. He couldn't let this derail the purpose of his visit. "I can't let this stop me," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Outside, journalists were already camping by the studio entrance, smartphones poised, ready to capture the next statement. Harry took a deep breath, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the press, a carefully measured smile masking the storm within. "I'll address the media," he told his security team, "but I'm here for the cause, not the controversy." Meanwhile, Lorraine Kelly, back in the studio, sat at her desk with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. She knew she had made headlines. Her confrontation with a prince would dominate news cycles, and yet she felt the weight of responsibility too. Journalism was about asking the hard questions, but at what cost? She stared at the empty chair where Harry had been sitting, the echo of their clash lingering in the air. For the public, the spectacle was immediate. Clips of the confrontation went viral within hours. Analysts dissected every gesture, every inflection. Talk shows debated who had been right or wrong. Some saw Lorraine as a fearless journalist holding the privileged accountable. Others sympathized with Harry, seeing a man pushed to the edge by relentless scrutiny. Amidst the chaos, Harry retreated to his private residence, the palace grounds that had always been both sanctuary and prison. There, in the quiet of his study, he reflected on the encounter. The anger, the frustration, and the embarrassment mingled with a newfound clarity. He realized that while the world could judge him in moments of conflict, his mission, to advocate for mental health, was far bigger than any televised argument. He picked up his phone and sent a message to his team. "We move forward. No distractions. Focus on the work, not the headlines." Later that evening, Lorraine sat alone in her living room, scrolling through the endless commentary. A part of her felt vindicated, yet another part wondered if she had pushed too far. Journalism, she knew, was a tightrope between truth and empathy. That night, both the prince and the presenter would lie awake, reflecting on a clash that neither could have predicted, but one that would define public discourse for months to come. Somewhere between the uproar and the aftermath, a quiet truth emerged: confrontation, though uncomfortable, often reveals the hidden strengths of those involved. Harry, despite being publicly humiliated, found resolve. Lorraine, despite criticism, recognized the weight of her influence. And the audience, whether they sided with the prince or the presenter, was left to witness a rare, unfiltered glimpse of human emotion played out on the grand stage of live television. In the end, it wasn't just a story about a prince and a presenter. It was about pressure, power, and the fragile humanity that binds them. And as the world watched and debated, both Harry and Lorraine knew that life, much like live TV, waited for no one, yet demanded courage from everyone. As the studio doors closed behind him, Prince Harry's steps echoed in the empty corridor, each one heavier than the last. He felt the sting of humiliation, yet beneath it, a strange surge of determination began to grow. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the world would not forget what had just unfolded. In the control room, Lorraine Kelly exhaled sharply, her composure intact, but her hands trembled slightly. She was used to tough interviews, yet Harry's fiery response had caught even her off guard. She had expected deflection, perhaps a polite disagreement, but not the storm of raw emotion he had unleashed live on air. Producers whispered among themselves, eyes darting to the screens that now broadcast the aftermath across social media. Clips of the clash had already gone viral, comments flooding in within seconds. "Unbelievable," one tweeted. "The prince lost his cool," wrote another. And yet, in the swirl of reactions, there was an undercurrent of sympathy, a quiet understanding that the man behind the title was human after all. Harry retreated to a quiet side room, leaning against the wall, trying to calm the heat rising in his chest. His mind raced through the interview, the probing questions, Lorraine's relentless persistence, the sharp words exchanged. He thought of his work, the children and families counting on him, and the responsibility that weighed on him far heavier than any criticism. "I can't let this define me," he muttered, closing his eyes. "The cause is bigger than this." Meanwhile, Lorraine, still seated at her desk, stared at the empty chair that had once held the prince. A pang of unease crept through her, a rare feeling after years in television. Had she gone too far? Did she cross a line in pursuit of the truth? She had faced controversial figures before, but Harry was no ordinary guest. His words, his gestures, the unspoken weight of his life, everything carried an intensity that few could withstand. Back in the green room, Harry's team huddled, strategizing. They knew the headlines would not be kind. Tabloids thrived on drama, and social media would dissect every frame. But there was a consensus: this incident, as difficult as it was, had revealed something vital about the prince, his unwillingness to be passive, his courage to confront discomfort, even in public. Hours later, the palace communications team issued a carefully worded statement: Prince Harry remains committed to his work supporting mental health initiatives. Recent events reflect the challenges of live television but do not distract from the importance of the cause. It was diplomatic, precise, and intended to steer the narrative back to the Foundation's mission. As night fell over London, both Harry and Lorraine reflected on the day's events. One in the royal residence, the other in her studio apartment, each replayed the confrontation in their minds. In that clash, both had seen themselves differently, Harry as someone who could no longer rely solely on decorum, Lorraine as someone whose pursuit of truth could unsettle even the most composed figures. The world, of course, would have its own opinion. But behind the headlines, behind the viral clips, lay a quiet truth: confrontation, however public and uncomfortable, often exposes the depths of character. Harry, despite the embarrassment, found resilience. Lorraine, despite criticism, found perspective. And in the liminal space between challenge and resolution, the real story, the human story, emerged. By morning, the narrative had already begun to shift. Analysts praised Harry for speaking his mind, applauded Lorraine for her fearless questioning, and debated endlessly over who had the upper hand. Yet, for both, the lessons were clear. Life, much like live television, could be unpredictable, demanding, and relentless, but those who navigated it with courage and intention could turn even conflict into clarity. In the quiet aftermath, as London woke to another day, both Harry and Lorraine understood a shared truth: power and responsibility are inseparable, and every confrontation, no matter how tense, is an opportunity to reveal what lies beneath.